If you've ever had somebody look you dead in the eye and act like your land belongs to them, then you already know the feeling I had standing there that afternoon. The gate was open, polished black steel sliding smooth as butter between two giant stone columns, cars rolling in and out like they'd been doing it forever. And the woman standing beside it, hand on her hip, sunglasses on like she was posing for a brochure, smiled at me and said, "Mr. Lawson, this entrance was approved by the neighborhood board, and it's exactly where it's supposed to be." I looked at her, then at the steel post sunk into the ground a few feet from my cedar fence, and I said, "No, ma'am, it's not. My name's Caleb Lawson. I'm 56 years old, born and raised outside Mill Haven, Tennessee, and I live on the same stretch of land my grandfather bought after he came back from Korea. 112 acres of rolling pasture, oak trees older than anybody still alive, a creek winding through the east side, and a dirt lane my daddy taught me to drive on when I was 12. This place raised me, buried my parents, fed my family. So when I say I know every inch of it, I mean every inch. I know where the ground dips after heavy rain. I know where deer cross at sunset. I know exactly where my fence line sits because I helped my father replace half of it one hot August with splinters in our palms and sweat in our eyes. That land matters, which is why Cedar Ridge Preserve had already rubbed me wrong long before the gate showed up. 10 years ago, that whole side was open pasture. Then a developer bought it and carved it into oversized lots with matching houses and decorative mailboxes and a homeowners association with enough rules to run a small country. Their president was Vanessa Whitaker, mid-40s maybe, polished from head to toe, always smiling in a way that somehow felt like a warning. First time she knocked on my door, she complimented my property for 5 straight minutes before suggesting I repaint my roadside fence because it clashed with the visual tone of Cedar Ridge. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled sweet tea on my boots. Told her my fence didn't answer to her committee. She smiled, tight around the eyes, thanked me for my time, and left. Thought that was the end of it. Turns out it wasn't. Back in January, my sister in Knoxville had surgery, and I stayed with her nearly 2 weeks helping out. Snow came through while I was gone. Roads iced over. By the time I got home, everything looked normal, until I reached the south end of my property. At first I thought I was seeing things. A full entrance gate, stone pillars, keypad, security camera, decorative lanterns, big carved wooden sign that read Cedar Ridge Preserve South Entrance. It looked expensive too, fancy enough to belong in front of a country club, and every bit of it sat inside my property line. I parked the truck and just stared, wind blowing cold through the trees. Gravel crunching under tires as one of their residents punched in a code and drove through like nothing was wrong. For a second I actually wondered if I'd lost my mind. So I went inside, pulled my grandfather's survey records from the cabinet, then drove straight to county records first thing next morning. The woman behind the desk printed updated maps, looked everything over, and raised her eyebrows. "Mr. Lawson, unless I'm missing something, they're 15 feet onto your parcel. 15 feet. Concrete poured. Electrical conduit buried. Landscaping planted. All on my land. No easement. No agreement. No permit filed against my parcel. Nothing." I sat in my truck in that parking lot for 10 solid minutes with both hands on the wheel, trying not to let anger get ahead of common sense. Then I drove straight to Cedar Ridge. Their little guard station sat empty except for Vanessa stepping out the side door, carrying a travel mug like she had nowhere urgent to be. She smiled when she saw me. "Caleb, back in town." I nodded toward the gate. "That thing's on my property." She didn't even blink. "I don't believe that's accurate." I handed her copies of the survey and deed. She glanced at them for maybe 2 seconds and gave them back. Our contractor assured us the entrance was well within community boundaries. "Your contractor was wrong." "Well," she said, still smiling, "removing it now would be incredibly expensive and disruptive for residents. I'm sure as neighbors we can be flexible." That line right there told me everything. She knew exactly what she was doing. She was betting I'd complain, maybe threaten legal action, then eventually give up because fighting would cost too much and take too long. She thought she could build first and apologize never. I looked at her for a second, nodded once and said, "All right." Her smile widened. She thought she'd won. She had no idea I'd just stopped arguing because a much better idea had started forming in my head on the drive over. And by sunrise the next morning, I was already putting it into motion. By sunrise the next morning, I was already putting it into motion. I backed my old F-250 down to the south fence line with a stack of treated lumber in the bed and a thermos of coffee riding shotgun. The sun had barely cracked over the trees when I started digging. 2 hours later, right beside their shiny keypad entrance, I planted a 6-foot sign in the ground facing every car coming through. Private land. Access by written permission only. Unauthorized commercial use subject to fees. Bright white letters on dark red paint. Impossible to miss. Then I went back inside, sat at my kitchen table where my dad used to pay bills every Sunday night, and typed up an invoice. I made it look official. Clean header. Parcel number. Property description. Usage fees. Access and roadway encroachment for private entrance serving Cedar Ridge Preserve South residents. $10 per vehicle per month. Existing estimated balance due, $4,600. Payment due within 15 business days. I emailed it directly to Vanessa and copied every board member whose address I could find online. Then I waited. And sure enough, nothing. No reply. No phone call. No acknowledgement. Just silence. Which honestly was exactly what I expected. Folks like Vanessa usually mistake silence for power. They think if they ignore something long enough, the other person gets tired and backs down. But I wasn't tired. I was patient. Big difference. 3 days later, I launched the second half. I hired a local drone guy named Tyler, kid maybe 23 with a ball cap and enough camera gear to shoot a documentary. He flew over the entrance while I stood below with survey stakes marking the property line. We got everything. The steel track, the stone columns, the buried landscaping border, even the keypad pedestal planted squarely inside my parcel. Then I filed a formal encroachment complaint with Benton County Zoning and attached every photo and survey record I had. County moved faster than I expected. That Friday, an inspector named Raymond Bell pulled up in a white county truck. Raymond was maybe 60, looked like he'd spent most of his life outdoors, and didn't care for wasting time. He studied the gate, looked at the survey, then crouched beside the post with a tape measure. Finally, he stood up, dusted his hands, and said, "Well, this isn't going to be a fun meeting for somebody." "Bad?" I asked. "Depends who enjoys paying daily fines." He smiled a little. "You were right." News traveled through Cedar Ridge like wildfire. By dinner, I could practically hear the panic from across the tree line. Cars slowed at the entrance. Residents stood around whispering. Somebody from the landscaping crew pulled decorative shrubs out of the beds like they were trying to clean up a crime scene. That evening, my phone rang. Vanessa. First time she'd ever called me directly. Her voice sounded different. Softer. Less polished. "Caleb, I think maybe this has gotten bigger than it needed to." "Funny," I said. "I was thinking pouring concrete onto someone else's land made it pretty big from the start." Small pause. "The board wants to find a reasonable solution." "I'm listening. Perhaps we compensate you for temporary inconvenience until we can review contractor liability." I almost laughed. Temporary inconvenience. Like somebody parking crooked. Not building a gated entrance onto land they didn't own. "Vanessa," I said, "you can absolutely keep your gate." Silence. Then cautious hope in her voice. "You're serious?" "Sure am." "Then what are you asking?" "A lease." That silence got a whole lot heavier. "A what?" "A legal lease for restricted roadway access over my parcel. You use the land, you pay for the land." "That's absurd." "No, ma'am. Absurd is building a luxury entrance where you had no right to be." She hung up. I figured that was that. But the next evening I got another call, this time from a board member named Greg Mitchell. Nice enough guy. Sounded exhausted. "Mr. Lawson, Vanessa says you're proposing a lease arrangement." "Yep. And if we decline? County fines keep piling up and I reserve the right to deny access." Long exhale on his end. "Can we meet?" We met Sunday afternoon at the gate. Greg showed up with 2 other board members, and Vanessa came too, dressed sharp as ever, but looking like she hadn't slept. Wind kicked through the pines while cars lined up waiting to get through. I had paperwork in a folder under my arm. Vanessa opened first. "This feels punitive." "No," I said. Punitive would have been hiring a demolition crew. Greg almost smiled. One of the others coughed, trying not to laugh. I laid it out plain. Cedar Ridge could lease the 15-foot strip plus access easement for $3,000 a month. Payment due first of each month. Annual renewal. If payment failed or agreement was violated, access permission could be revoked. The board members exchanged looks. Vanessa folded her arms. That number is outrageous. Compared to what you spent building this. I asked. Seems pretty fair. Greg asked quietly. And county complaint? Lease gets signed and current fees paid. I notify the county we reached private resolution. Vanessa stared at me like she was trying to figure out whether I was bluffing. I wasn't. That's the thing. When you grow up on land like mine, you learn patience because land teaches patience. Trees don't care how loud somebody talks. Property lines don't care how rich a neighborhood gets. Facts stay facts. And deep down I think she realized she'd run out of options. Monday afternoon my attorney drew everything up. Tuesday evening the board signed. Vanessa signed last. Tight jaw. Perfect handwriting. Didn't look at me once. Greg handed over the first certified check right there at my lawyer's office. $6,000. First month plus fees already due. I drove home with that envelope on the passenger seat and laughed the whole way down Highway 41. Not because of the money exactly, though I won't pretend that part felt bad. It was the principle of it. They'd assumed old county land meant nobody would push back. Assumed being organized and expensive made them untouchable. But they learned real quick a deed matters more than landscaping and confidence. Over the next month life got interesting. Residents at Cedar Ridge started noticing the arrangement. Word spread. Some thought it was hilarious. Others blamed Vanessa for overreaching. A retired couple named the Hendersons actually stopped by my fence one evening and apologized on behalf of the neighborhood. Brought homemade peach cobbler too. Nice folks. Said they never even knew the gate crossed onto my property. Vanessa meanwhile got colder every time I saw her. One afternoon I drove by, and she was standing under the stone pillar directing contractors adjusting cameras. She saw me, lifted her chin, and looked away. I took my hat. She hated that. And every single time that gate opened for another SUV or delivery van or golf cart rolling through Cedar Ridge Preserve South, I knew exactly whose land made that possible. Then late one Friday, just when I thought the whole thing had finally settled into a rhythm, my attorney called and said, "Caleb, you may want to get down here. Vanessa just filed something with county records." And that's when things got a whole lot more personal. I was halfway through fixing a busted latch on the barn when my attorney called. Soon as I heard his tone, I set the wrench down. He said, "Caleb, Vanessa just filed a petition claiming historic roadway access across your parcel." For a second I honestly thought I'd heard him wrong. She looked calm on the outside, but there was tension around her eyes. I'd seen enough people bluff to recognize it. The county clerk reviewed her petition first. Vanessa's attorney gave a polished little speech about community infrastructure and established expectations and neighborhood necessity. Sounded real convincing if you liked expensive words. Then Daniel stood up and handed over the evidence. Photos, maps, survey records, timeline. He kept it simple. Folks come and go like they always have. Delivery vans, contractors, residents heading home after work. And every single one passes through land they once tried to take for free. My grandfather would have loved that part. Sometimes I park near the fence around sunset with sweet tea in hand and watch the gate slide open and closed while cicadas buzz in the trees. There's something satisfying about seeing patience beat arrogance without ever raising your voice. But I'll leave this to you, because around here people still argue about whether I handled it right. Some say I should have forced them to tear the whole thing down. Others say charging rent forever was colder than demolition because now they have to think about it every month when that check clears. So tell me what you think. If somebody built on your land and acted like they owned it, would you tear it out and make a point, or leave it standing and make them pay for the privilege? Drop your answer below. And if you enjoy stories where ordinary people stand their ground and remind powerful neighbors exactly where the line is, hit like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.